Hey everyone, welcome back to RetroBreak. Today we're taking a look at the RG35XXSP. As you can see, this is a new handheld styled after the Game Boy Advance SP right here. It is obviously a little bit thicker and it has 4 face buttons instead of 2, but there's so much more to this device, so let's take a look. So here's the box, as you can see, very nice and simple packaging, and inside here's the system itself. I've already taken it out of its protective packaging. And of course you also get the regular things like a lens protector, like some cleaning cloths, and in there as well you also get the charger, which of course I already have hundreds of, so that will never be leaving the packaging. So that's what comes in the box. So here's the system. As you can see, much like all of Anbernic's other consoles, it has 2 different micro SD card slots, one for the operating system and one for the games. As you can see at the minute, on this one by default, everything is just on this one card here, which is 64 gigabytes. And the spring there was actually a little less responsive than usual. In fact, I just pressed it in and nothing actually happened, so it is a little bit difficult to get them in and out. Maybe the other one's a bit better. Let's try. Oh no, that one has the same issue. So it's a good job I haven't cut my nails in a while, so I can actually get the card out of there. So let's put it back in that slot, as that is where the operating system boots from. There we go. It also has a headphone socket, which the original Game Boy Advance SP didn't have. On this side we have volume buttons instead of a volume slider. On this side we have a power button and a reset button, and then we have power indicators, one for whether the system's turned on and one for whether it's charging. And then at the top, in good old Anbernic fashion, we have a mini HDMI socket, and we also have a USB-C port for charging the device, and of course we have 2 different sets of L and R buttons. And when we open it up, this is the most obvious change. We have 4 different face buttons rather than the SP's 2. You also have a regular D-pad, and these are actually very thin buttons, kind of like the original SP, but they do feel a little bit different, and I'll get to that in just a second. We also have the brightness adjuster just there, although in this case it actually takes you back to the menu, and of course we have start and select. Very, very clicky start and select buttons. So now let's compare it to an SP. This one here is my original Game Boy Advance SP from when I was a kid that I got on launch day in 2003 here in the UK. As you can see, it is very slightly smaller than the Anbernic version. It is also quite a bit thinner as well, as you can see there. The entire of the Game Boy Advance SP basically takes up the bottom portion of the Anbernic one, so I'm not really sure why they needed that much extra space. Maybe it has a thicker battery. Of course, if we look at the bottom, it doesn't have a game card slot. I would love to see these systems with actual card slots, if that's even possible in the future, who knows. And of course there's no USB ports and there's no SD card slots on the original. And then let's open it up inside. And obviously you can see that there's only 2 face buttons here rather than the 4 on this one. It is very strange seeing an SP design with 4 face buttons instead of just 2. But now we'll move on to some of the downsides of this system. So let's start with the original. The buttons on this feel amazing. They are some of my favourite Nintendo buttons ever. It has very flat buttons, but they're very easy to press. You only need to use the lightest touch to press all of them, including the triggers. And these buttons on the face, they're basically silent and they feel incredible. But when you compare it to this one, these just feel awful in comparison. There's a lot more travel, which means that you have to put a lot more force down to actually press the buttons, and they're extremely loud. I haven't heard any buttons on any of these handheld systems that are as loud as these ones. In fact, I tried playing this in bed the other night and I was actually worried that I would be annoying my fiance because of how loud these buttons were. So just listen. I would say that's unacceptable. That's gonna draw attention to you. It feels like you're popping bubble wrap or something. Compare that to the original Game Boy SP, and you can't even hear that I'm pressing anything there. It's pretty ridiculous. And the same with the triggers. They're incredibly, incredibly loud. And they rattle as well. Like, the original SP, you can't hear anything, but these ones sound like maracas, honestly. But hopefully it's something that they will address in the future in an updated or revised version of this design, because I do love the flip clamshell design. It's just my favourite form factor. It's really nice and comfortable, and it's easy to do that and just slip into your jeans pocket, which some of these other systems, that is a little bit of a struggle. So anyway, let's get it turned on and we can take a look at the screen compared to all these different Game Boy Advance SPs. So while I'm turning this on, there is another very big difference that you'll see straight away. So here's all the SPs lined up. Let's turn them on one by one, starting with this one here. There we go. None of them have any games in. And the sound's a bit different on all of them, but there we go. There's the three SPs with three very different screens. This one on the right is one that I actually fitted my own LCD screen onto, which just looks incredible, and it's easily the best screen on any Game Boy that I've got. This one here is an AGS 101, so this was Nintendo's official backlight when the remake came out in 2005. I believe it was 2005. And then this one is the front lit version. This is my original Game Boy SP. So let's turn this one on. First thing you'll notice, there's no actual power switch like there is on all of the other SPs. So you actually have to press this in. And it's actually quite difficult to figure out when it's turning on or when it's in sleep. So I'm pressing it now and nothing's happening. You actually have to hold it for a good, well, I thought you had to hold it for like 10 seconds, but that time it turned on the same amount of time that I'd pressed it the previous times. So I really have no idea. And then you have to wait for this boot up screen for quite a while before you can get into the system itself. So there is an obvious advantage with the original SP, that it just boots up straight into the games instantly. There's no waiting for operating systems to load like this one, which is still loading. There we go, we're finally into the console itself. So let's just close these for a second. And we can come back to them in just a second. Let's take a look at the operating system. I have already played it a little bit, so I did actually change the theme here. I quite like this new theme that was sort of an original for this system here. So this is a really nice sort of minimalistic theme. And of course, as this is an Anbernic system, it comes with the game rooms, which I found out from my previous video is not what you want to click on. So ignore game rooms completely and move to RA game. These ones actually run a lot better. So in here you can see it's got exactly the same list of games as it does with all of these other systems here. We have PSP, Dreamcast, PlayStation 1, a bunch of arcade systems, Neo Geo, Pico 8, Pokemon Mini, Atari, Virtual Boy, Game Boy, SNES, Mega Drive, Saturn, MSX, Game Gear, Game Boy Color, PC Engine, WonderSwan, MSX again, DS, N64, Atomic Wave, Naomi, and ports as well, which are sort of ports of various different computer games to this system. And of course the menu is pretty much identical to all the other ones. But let's start by booting up a Game Boy Advance game, and we can actually compare it to a real Game Boy Advance. So as you can see, as always, this comes preloaded with hundreds of different games, and I'm quite impressed this time. The games are actually just listed with their game titles rather than the random numbers in front of them. So that is an improvement. So let's choose a game, and then I'll boot the same game up on the Game Boy Advance as well. Let's go with F-Zero Maximum Velocity, one of my favourites. It does take a little bit of time to boot into the games as well, but when it does... Oh yeah, I've also managed to get retro achievements to work on here, which is really cool too. So this actually has built-in Wi-Fi, and you can use that to either play games with other people or boot it up across the internet. Another cool thing is you can see that it's actually applied this border by default, and it's put a little bit of a screen effect over it. I don't know whether you can see on the camera or not, but it looks quite nice in real life. So let me go and find my original copy of Maximum Velocity and we can do a comparison. There it is. So let's put this in the SP and we can take a look at what it looks like on an original system. Let's start off with this one here. And that is as bright as the screen can go. It's either off or very dim backlight. So let's get these in the same place. Just look at the difference there. That is incredible. And the button there, instead of adjusting the brightness, actually boots up the RetroArch menu. So you've got all of your different menu options here, including achievements that I mentioned earlier. And I did actually apply the RetroArch menu that I like the best. This one's based on the old PlayStation 3 style. And honestly, if it wasn't for the extremely clicky buttons and the fact that they're a little bit harder to press, this would be an incredible way of playing Game Boy Advance games. But let's take a look at some other systems. So you can reset it just by pressing that button on the side. And it'll reboot straight away. While it's doing that, let's take a look and see how F-Zero looks in the other systems too. And you can see how slow that is to load, because I've basically already booted back into the game and that hasn't even gone back to the menu yet. So this is how it looks on the actual Game Boy Advance SP 101, which was Nintendo's official backlight. And then here's how it looks on my modded Game Boy Advance SP, and I would say, just because of the buttons, that this is probably still my favourite way to play Game Boy Advance games, despite the fact that the screen is actually slightly smaller than the RG version. But it just feels a lot more natural to play it this way. Anyway, I could play F-Zero for hours. Let's go back to this, and I'll show you some more systems. So, to wake it up from sleep, you just press the button on the side there. I also wonder whether it has a built-in sleep function, like the DS and systems that came out after the SP. So if we very carefully open this, let's see if the screen's turned off. It was actually turned off, so I wonder how well that works as a battery saving mechanism. Let's check out PSP, and let's have a look at what games we've got on here. Let's check out one of my favourites, Castlevania X. An amazing PSP game. So first thing I noticed, the resolution is wrong, so it needs sort of adjusting for the widescreen resolution of the PSP. But the frame rate looks nice, and this screen's really, really nice too. It's just a shame about the buttons. Honestly, if they got the buttons right, I could easily 100% recommend this. Hey, it looks really nice though. Oh, a little bit of slowdown there. It's kind of surreal playing a PSP game on what is basically a Game Boy Advance. There is a bit of issues there. So this looks like it's using the PPSSPP emulator. Rendering resolution at 1x, which is fine because I think this is only a 480p screen anyway. Correct me if I'm wrong down in the comments. Oh, there we go. That's better. It looks a little bit too small now though, so... And there is a little bit of slowdown when certain things are happening. But still, really cool, really impressive to see this running. So let's check another system out. Let's try something else a little bit more powerful. Let's have a look at the Dreamcast and see what games are on that system. Let's try Crazy Taxi. Always one of my favourite go-to games on the Dreamcast. It is a little weird how Dreamcast games will handle on this because there's no analog stick, obviously. So we'll see what happens. As you can see, it logged into Retro Achievements, which I'm quite excited about. I need to try and look into that a bit more. I might do a dedicated video on it in the future. Okay, so A is B. First weird thing that I've encountered right there. Let's turn the sound up, although I don't want to get demonetized. But the soundtrack on Crazy Taxi is amazing, so I have to weigh up my options there. So a little bit awkward because it's actually the two triggers on the back that are accelerate, but it seems to be running fine. I'll turn up the sound a little bit. And I guess a game like this, it doesn't really matter that there's no analog controls. It actually looks really nice. I'm really, really impressed for the most part with this system. And no slowdown either, from what I can tell. I really enjoyed playing this on an actual arcade machine at MCM the other day, so kind of interesting to compare it to how it's playing on this. Obviously not as exciting as having a full arcade machine with a steering wheel and pedals and everything. It is also a little bit difficult on this because there's obviously no nuance with a D-pad. It's either all or nothing, so it is kind of twitchy, but it works, which is really cool. And I'm sure if you go into the settings, there's probably ways of tweaking things. But yeah, just don't take your gaming too seriously, and you can probably have fun with Dreamcast on this. So let's check out one more system, and then I'll give you my closing thoughts and impressions on this device. Let's actually check out some of the ports, because I've never really looked into those before on this system. So let's go right to the end here and see what they've got in here. So there's an Outrun port called Cannonball. There's a Cave Story port, which is really cool. Quake, I wonder how Quake would play on this. There's a bunch of different versions of Quake. Should we try that out? Quake Rogue. Let's see what this one is. Wow, that is really smooth. Obviously, you probably can't tell quite how smooth it is because the video is only in 30 frames a second, but from my eyes, this looks incredible. This is genuinely really impressive. It's so smooth. And with this nice big screen as well, it looks really cool. And I think I'm going to drown. Yep, I drowned, but I found a secret area. Anyway, that is awesome. Really impressed. So final thoughts on the 35XXSP. Mostly really positive, and I really enjoyed my time with this from what I've tried so far. Some of the issues, obviously, booting up to the menu takes forever. Like, look how slow that's being. That's just unacceptable for a handheld device that you would want to jump in and out of. Having to wait this long every time you change games or want to switch in and out or just turn it off and turn it back on again is just way too long for what it's actually worth. I quite like the menu. I've kind of got used to this Anbernic style menu now. The fact that it runs RetroArch fully and it has Wi-Fi support, which means retro achievements and stuff, that is really cool. The screen is really nice and big. I'm actually a big fan of this screen. It looks really nice. In fact, it actually looks nicer than any of the actual Game Boy Advance SPs that I've got. So on the whole, I'm really happy with this. The only real issue that I've got is the fact that the buttons are just way too loud and kind of hard to press. So if they could fix that one thing, maybe make it a little bit thinner to match the original SP, I'm sure they can do that. I mean, phones are thinner than that, and there's not really anything that's filling up that space apart from the battery. If they can make it a little bit thinner, if they could make it so it has a power switch instead of this power button, that'd be really cool. And if they could just speed it up a little bit too. But on the whole, this is easily the best retro emulation system that I've played so far, and I am genuinely really enjoying my time with it, which is definitely more than what I could say for some of the other ones that I've reviewed in the past. So there you go, that was my impressions of the RG35XXSP. Let me know what you thought of it down in the comments below, and if you want to see more retro handheld reviews, then click the playlist up there and watch the rest of those videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all again very soon. Goodbye.